All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into 17th century Flemish society, but not just any old history lesson. Oh no. We're going to be looking at it through the lens of this really cool play called Beggars Bush by Beaumont and Fletcher.
It's a pretty wild ride, full of hidden identities and secret kingdoms and yeah, some pretty sharp social commentary too.
Yeah, and to help us get there, we've got some excerpts from the play itself, thanks to Project Gutenberg, and
Oh, and we've got some background on all the different printed editions too, which is, well, that's always fascinating to see how a play was received and changed over time.
right, like looking through different windows into the past.
Exactly. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's set the scene. 17th century Flanders. Now, when you hear Flanders, don't think, sleepy medieval village or
No,
anything.
no, no, we're talking major power player on the European stage, a bustling hub of trade, politics, you name it.
All right, so right off the bat, the play throws us into this power struggle. Flanders is under the rule of this guy, Wolfert, and he's a usurper. He's basically seized control illegally. And the rightful Earl, well, he's just a kid and he's had to flee with his father, Gerard, leaving the people to deal with this tyrannical rule.
Usurpation, huh?
Yeah.
That's a pretty common theme in plays from this era. And it's not just a plot device, is it? I mean, the 17th century was a time of massive political upheaval all across Europe. Kings and queens being overthrown, new powers rising.
Oh, absolutely. This play would have hit close to home for the audience back then. It's tapping into that very real fear of instability, that anxiety about who's really in control.
Yeah, like a cautionary tale writ large, right? Be careful who you trust with power. Okay, so we've got a power-hungry usurper. Who else should we be keeping an eye on in this world?
Well, there's this really interesting character, Goswin. He's a wealthy merchant in Bruges. And Bruges, by the way, was one of the few cities still holding out against Wolfert, so you can already see this tension brewing. But Goswin, well, there's more to him than meets the eye.
Okay, lay it on me. What makes him so special? Aside from, being rich.
He's almost, I don't know, too good. He's incredibly generous, he helps the poor, and get this, he even ransoms a captured pirate.
Wait, he ransoms a pirate?
Yeah.
That's a pretty big risk, especially for a merchant, someone who's supposed to be all about, well, profit.
Right. It's like they're deliberately setting us up for something. But I think on a deeper level, Goswin represents this idealized version of the merchant class. He's proof that you can be wealthy and virtuous. And this would have been really appealing to the merchant class in the audience who were, let's face it, gaining more and more influence at the time.
It's like they're saying, hey, we merchants, we're not all bad. Okay, so we've got our scheming usurper and our suspiciously noble merchant. Where do the beggars fit into all of this?
Ah, yes, the beggars. Can't forget them. So the play introduces us to Gerard. He appears to be a poor, harmless beggar just looking for alms from Goswin, but remember what we said about hidden identities.
Let me guess. This beggar is not who he seems.
You got it. Turns out Gerard is actually the exiled Earl's father in disguise. And here's where it gets really interesting. He's not just hiding out. He's leading a whole secret kingdom of beggars, operating right under everyone's noses in Beggars Bush.
Wait, a whole kingdom? You mean like with laws and everything?
Exactly. They have their own elections, their own social structure. It's this fascinating commentary on poverty and vagrancy, which were huge issues back then. Beaumont and Fletcher are acknowledging that even those living on the fringes of society, they have their own system of order, their own ways of life.
So it's not just some fantasy element thrown in for fun, right? There's this deeper social message woven into it.
Yes.
I love that. Okay, so hidden identities, a secret society.
Yeah.
What about a little romance? I'm guessing there's got to be a love story somewhere in all this intrigue.
Of course. Gotta have a love story. So there's Gertrude. She's the object of Goswin's affections. But naturally there's a problem. Her uncle, Hemskirk, wants to marry her off to someone else. For profit, of course.
Ugh, classic greedy relative move. So I'm guessing Goswin doesn't just sit back and let this happen.
Not a chance. He stands up to Hemskirk, even gets into a brawl with him to protect Gertrude, which, again, shows that noble streak in him, but it also, adds a little bit of humor to the mix.
Right, because even in the midst of political intrigue and social commentary, people still got to have a good laugh, right?
Exactly. And that little bit of humor also reflects a shift in social values. I mean, arranged marriages, they were the norm back then, especially for the upper classes. But here's Goswin, a merchant, standing up for love and basically saying, no, we're not going to do things the old way anymore.
So Beggars Bush has given us a glimpse into a lot more than just the plot. We're seeing the political landscape, the social issues, even the economic realities of 17th century Flanders.
And we're just getting started. There's a whole lot more to uncover, but we'll save that for next time.
All right, I'm hooked. But before we go any further, let's really put ourselves in this world. Imagine yourself walking through the bustling streets of 17th century Flanders. The port is packed with ships from all over the globe. Fortunes are being made and lost in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, and there's this undercurrent of tension everywhere you go. You can feel the power struggle, the social unrest simmering just below the surface.
And who knows, you might even bump into a beggar who's not quite what they seem. Someone who holds the key to restoring justice and order. Keep that image in mind as we continue this deep dive into Beggars Bush.
Absolutely, and I think we'll be surprised at what we find. So, where were we? Oh yeah, scheming, usurper, secret merchant, and a whole bunch of beggars running their own kingdom. It's a lot, I know, but hang in there. It's about to get even wilder.
Get me with it. Last we left off, there was a missing earl. A whole lot of hidden identities. What happens next?
Well, we gotta go back to Gerard, our beggar in disguise. Remember him? He finally reveals his true identity to Goswin A&D. Get this. Goswin himself is actually the missing heir, Flores.
Hold up. So the noble merchant everyone's been admiring this whole time is actually royalty. That's a pretty epic reveal. I can only imagine what the audience back then thought.
Oh yeah, they would have been on the edge of their seats. It's classic dramatic irony, right? The audience knows the truth, but the characters are clueless. And it plays right into those fears about rightful rulers. The true heir isn't off in some far-off land. He's been right there all along, living a simple life.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? If no one had known his true identity, would he have ever claimed his birthright? Would he have chosen a quiet life over the responsibility of ruling?
That's a great point. It's like the play is saying that true leadership isn't about bloodlines, it's about character.
Okay, so big reveal, identity's exposed, but I have a feeling this isn't going to be a smooth transition of power. What does Wolfert, our usurper friend, think about all this?
Well, let's just say he's not thrilled. Thanks to our good friend Hemskirk always stirring up trouble, that guy Wolfert gets wind of the truth and sets a trap to capture Flores and Gerard. He uses this huntsman, Hubert, to lure them into the woods.
A trap in the woods. That's not sounding too good. But this is where our secret beggar kingdom comes into play, right?
You know it. This is where we see just how clever and resourceful they really are. Two of the beggars, Hagen and Prig, they use their skills as entertainers, songs, jokes, all that, to distract Wolfert's men. They basically buy Flores and Gerard time to escape.
So they're not just a bunch of outcasts. They're like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
A force to be reckoned with. I love it. It's like they represent this hidden strength, this kind of underdog power that can emerge when people are pushed to the margins.
Absolutely. And think about how this would have resonated with the audience. These lowly beggars outsmarting the powerful, the elite. It would have been a real crowd pleaser and, a little bit subversive too.
Right, like a little wink to the audience saying, hey, even the powerless can find a way to fight back. Okay, back to our huntsman, Hubert. You said he was working for Wolfert, but something tells me he might be a little more complicated than that.
Oh, you're catching on. Yeah, Hubert's not quite what he seems. In another twist, it turns out he's actually been working undercover all along, loyal to Gerard and Flores the whole time.
Wow, another double cross. These playwrights really knew how to keep the audience guessing. It's no wonder these plays were so popular. They're full of suspense, intrigue, and characters you can never quite pin down.
It's brilliant, isn't it? Just when you think the bad guys have won, bam, this unexpected twist throws everything into chaos. And for the audience, it's a moment of pure relief. The good guys, even though they seem powerless, they've got a secret weapon.
It's that glimmer of hope, right? Even in the darkest moments, there's always a chance for things to turn around. Okay, so Wolfert's plan is messed up, but he's still in power. How does all this lead to a resolution? What happens next? I need to know. Okay, so deep breath. We've got a busted trap, a rightful heir revealed, and a huntsman who's playing both sides. What happens next? How does Beggars Bush tie all this together?
Well, with a little help from Hubert, everything comes to a head in this big ol' showdown. Imagine it. The beggars, and now we know they can fight, they join forces with Flores and Gerard to finally take down Wolfert. It's this big battle, not just for, control of Flanders, but for the soul of the region, you could say.
I bet it was quite a scene. The clash of swords, the roar of the crowd. This isn't just about power, right? It's about righting a wrong, about restoring justice to people who have been well, really suffering under this tyrant.
Absolutely. It's about reclaiming what was lost. It's about good triumphing over evil. And of course, like any good story, virtue wins out in the end. Wolfert is captured, and Flores is finally restored as the rightful Earl of Flanders.
Right, happy ending, good guys win. But it's never really that simple, is it? I mean, the play doesn't shy away from the moral gray areas, does it?
Not at all. Even in victory, there are still some tough questions to grapple with. Take Flores, for example. He's been living this peaceful, quiet life as Goswin. Does he even want the burden of leadership? Is he driven by a sense of duty to his people? Or is there a part of him that, well, maybe kind of likes the idea of power?
It makes you wonder if the play is saying that true leadership sometimes means making sacrifices, putting aside your own happiness for the greater good. What about Gertrude? Does she stand by him even though her life is going to change drastically now that he's, well, basically royalty?
That's a great question. And the play doesn't really give us a clear-cut answer. It's left open to interpretation. It makes us think about the cost of leadership, about how duty and personal desires sometimes clash.
And what about the beggars? There's such a crucial part of this whole story. What happens to them? What happens to their secret kingdom once Flores is back in power?
Their fate is a bit of a mystery, actually. We see how clever and resourceful and even, yeah, how skilled they are in battle. But the play also shows us their less noble side, their willingness to bend the rules, to deceive, to get what they need.
It's a reminder that even those fighting for a just cause, they aren't always, squeaky clean. They've had to make some tough choices to survive.
Right. Beaumont and Fletcher aren't giving us these easy categories of good and evil. All the characters, even the beggars, they're complex. They're driven by a whole mix of motivations.
It makes the play feel so much more real, so much more relevant to us today, don't you think? It's not just a dusty old history lesson. It's a reflection on human nature itself, the pull of ambition, the will to survive, the complexities of power.
And that's what makes Beggars Bush so brilliant. It entertains us with these wild plot twists and these characters you can't help but get invested in, but it also makes us think about bigger questions, about leadership, about justice, about what we would do when faced with really difficult circumstances.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways? What makes this play worth revisiting, even after all these centuries?
Well, for one thing, it gives us this amazing glimpse into a really fascinating period of history. We've seen the political anxieties, the social tensions of 17th century Flanders, a world that was dealing with issues that, let's face it, we're still grappling with today. Inequality, the struggle for justice, power dynamics.
It's a history lesson, yes, but it's also so much more than that. It's a story that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about what we're capable of when the stakes are high, about how power can corrupt, even with the best intentions.
Exactly. It's a reminder that the lines between good and evil are never really that clear. It challenges us to think about our own values, to question our assumptions, to consider the perspectives of those who are often ignored or pushed aside.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap things up. We've gone deep into the world of Beggars Bush, explored the history, the plot, the characters, but ultimately I think this deep dive has been about more than just understanding a single play.
Yeah, it's about using that play as a way to understand our own world, our own choices, our own values.
So to our listener, we leave you with this. The next time you encounter a story, any story, don't just take it at face value. Look for those hidden meanings, those connections to the past, those things that can help you understand the present.
Because like we've seen with Beggars Bush, even a play written hundreds of years ago can still speak to us today, offering insights and challenges that are timeless.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Beggars Bush. We'll see you next time for another exploration of history, ideas, and, of course, the power of stories.